Little project we got working on today. First world problems with towing with a modified Honda Ridgeline. So this truck has a 1.5 inch front strut spacer kit on it. I don't know if I can truly call it a lift kit, even though some people do. I was one of the first people to install these. Like literally bought the kit on a pre-buy. I don't even know that we had this thing in our possession yet. But anyways, so it's got 1.5 inches in the front and nothing in the back. So it's a leveling kit, we'll call it. This works out really good until, just like a lot of people soon realize after they have a truck with a leveling kit and they do any kind of towing, that now the rear end squats down lower than the front. It being in the case that we're running a leveling kit, you know, that's not the end of the world. It just looks stupid. So we're going to put some of the rake back in. We're not going 1.5 inches. The wife absolutely did not want that. Doesn't like that much rake in it. So I just want to put a little bit back in there. We kind of agreed upon that. So I'm going to be today installing some 1/2 inch strut spacers for the rear struts. These are the Traxdas, and it's a split design, so hopefully it's really easy to get in there. We're getting ready to find out. I'm going to put the Honda up on the quick jacks for the first time and see how that goes. So let's get it up in the air and then we'll see what it's going to take to put these rear spacers in. So we got it up in the air on the quick jacks. Back to the task at hand. This looks worlds simpler than the fronts. It's got a very simple strut in the back, and you can see that pad that's up there on the subframe. We're literally going to be taking these guys and it's going to go in between that strut mount and the subframe, and I'm assuming the reason why it's a split design spacer is because the strut goes up into the subframe. I'm pretty sure that's what's going on here. I'll get the 3 bolts out and see if this will drop down at all, and hopefully this is going to be amazingly more simple than when I did the front. So I'm going to take those 3 bolts out going up into the subframe and we'll see what it looks like. The tools that I used for installing the 1/2 inch strut spacers, or 1/2 inch lift spacers, made by Traxda. 14mm. Used 14mm deep socket on a 1/2 inch drive ratchet to get the bolts broken loose. 14mm, you're going to need a socket of some kind because the bolt heads are recessed in the upper strut plate, or upper strut mount. Torque wrench, that's just one of the cheap O'Reilly's ones, works just fine. Pry bar, always need a pry bar. Flat bladed screwdriver with the nose rounded off, also used as pry bar, even though you're not supposed to use it as a pry bar. Flashlight, I used a punch to knock the plates around to get them lined up, and you always have to have a hammer on site. And no goddamn claw hammers. We only use ball peen hammers on cars. We're not building fences here. Oh, and a lovely makeup mirror from the old lady's stash, because all of my inspection mirrors are busted. But if you use the 2-piece spacer that is sold by Traxda, you're going to want to make sure that the 2 pieces are keyed together before you torque them down tight. So that's the tools I used. Like I said, if you're going to be doing one of the tall actual lifts on the back of a Honda Ridgeline from that company, it's going to be more involved. You're going to be probably having to drop the suspension cradle down, which it advises in the instructions. But to just do the 1/2 inch kit that they sell, you don't need to do all that. It probably takes about a half an hour to put this kit on. So that's our overview for the tools that I use to do the 1/2 inch kit. See if I can learn how to fast forward video in some of my clips using my editing software, like a lot of people do, but I've never figured out how. I'm going to see if I can learn how to fast forward video in some of my clips using my editing software, like a lot of people do, but I've never figured out how, so that people don't have to sit here and watch ratcheting to nowhere around. Okay, so that strut mount right here is starting to lower away from the subframe already. My suspicion though is that if I leave the sway bar hooked up, it's not really going to come down any more than that. Now I'm only installing a 1/4 inch spacer, so it should be pretty easy to weasel in there. This is lifted as a 1/2 inch lift. It's a 1/4 inch spacer to get a 1/2 inch out at the wheel. It's not 1-to-1 because it's on a control arm independent suspension. Okay, so I finished getting the bolts out and I stuck a pry bar in there, and I was able to get the top strut mount pried down out of the subframe. You can see I've got a little Allen socket jammed in there to hold it down for now. I was making sure there wasn't any alignment pins or anything like that. So yeah, if you're doing one of the actual much taller lift kits, like 1 inch, 1.5 inch, 2 inch spacers in the back, I'm pretty sure you're gonna have to disconnect the sway bar and possibly lower the suspension cradle down, which is what the instructions say to do. But since I'm literally just stuffing a 1/4 inch spacer plate in there, I mean, you can see how far I've already managed to pull it down. So I'm gonna stick the spacers in there, and we'll see if we can get the bolts back started and see what it looks like then. Okay, front bolt's started. There's probably an easier way to do this, but I'm not always about easy. Okay, both pieces are stuck back in there. I'm going to go ahead and get all the bolts started. we'll touch bases then. Okay, so I got all 3 bolts started. Threads are engaged. I have verified that the split is keyed together. Here's the one for the other side. You can see how that keys together. Get my hands out of the light. So I'm going to go ahead and run these bolts in, and we'll get them torqued up. I didn't think to look for a torque spec. I'm sure that's floating around online somewhere. I'll go find that here in a minute. Yes, we're going to use air ratchet to put these long-winded bolts back in. Alright, less torquing them down. That is one side done. I'll get them torqued up, put the wheel back on, and we'll go over to the other side. Okay, so the finished product on the right rear. You can see the little itty bitty 1/4 inch spacer in there. It's keyed together. Fits really nice. And I got the bolts torqued back up. I couldn't quickly find the torque specs for the Gen 2 Ridgeline rear upper strut mounts, so if anybody knows that, if you could comment, that would be awesome. I just ended up using the torque spec for the upper rear strut mount on a Gen 1 Honda Ridgeline. And I put 5 more on it, so call her 30 foot-pounds, and that all seems fine, felt fine. Nothing squishy or stupid. So we're done with the passenger side, and we'll go finish the driver's side and put the wheels back on and see what we ended up with. Like a dummy though, I didn't measure before, so I'm going to be eyeballing any amounts of lift that are now in the back. So we've wrapped up the 1/2 inch Traxda lift.
You've got a text message.
It all turned out really good. I'm glad we went with the 1/2 inch and not the 1 inch. It is, even that 1/2 inch is noticeable. Not sure how well it shows up on a GoPro camera, but there's a noticeable amount of rake back. Not too much. It's still not as much as how it's from delivered from Honda. So there's an 1.5 inch spacer in the front, and there's a 1/2 inch spacer in the rear, which is exactly what we were looking for. I think if we would have went with a 1 inch in the back, it would have been too much, and it would have looked a lot like stock. Just made it harder to get in and out of. We're not putting steps on this thing, and neither of us like steps on it, so it's just not really in the works. All we were trying to do was get back just a little bit of rake so that when we have our little 21-foot camper on here, that it doesn't sit nose high. You get all these goofballs in the campgrounds that are scoffing at you going, oh my god, that thing's horribly overloaded, when they have no idea that it has a leveling kit in the front of it. So I think between the weight distribution hitch and the 1/2 inch spacers in the back, this thing's going to be dialed in really nice. We've already towed our camper a couple of times with the without the spacers in the back, and honestly it sits just about level. It's not like it's really nose high, but this is going to be even better, and might even put the weight bars in a better spot. So hope this helps. Kind of bummed out I never filmed the front installation, because it was a bugger to install. There is some information on the Ridgeline forums that I did amongst a whole bunch of other people. Not too many self-installers on the front though. I may have been the first, I don't know. I didn't have anything to go off, so I can kind of consider myself to be the first to have done the front on a Ridgeline, and that was literally in 2016, I believe we did it. I don't think it was 2017, even though it's 2017 model year. We got this thing early. Bought it sight unseen, ordered through Honda. And anyways, enough of my rambling. If you guys have any questions, you know where to put them.